There are thousands of stories you could tell about the Second World War. Thousands of photos, letters, memories, and personal experiences. And today we're just looking at two. The story of two brothers from the village of Cawthorne in Barnsley. Two brothers who made a tremendous impact not just during the war, but after it as well. Two brothers whose lives are remembered and whose legacies live on in various ways. This is a story of the Dundas brothers, Hugh and John. So join me as we look at this part of Yorkshire's hidden history. John Charles Dundas was born in Doncaster in 1915. His younger brother, Hugh, was born in 1920. The family were related to the aristocracy and listed in Burke's Peerage, the go-to who's who of the British upper class. They moved to Dale House in Cawthorne in 1924. John was a highly intelligent young man. He won a scholarship to the Stowe boarding school at 12 and then another, aged 17, to Oxford. There he completed a first-class degree in modern history before winning yet another award to study in France and Germany. He then joined the Yorkshire Post as a journalist, and his experience abroad must have earned him recognition as a specialist in foreign affairs. In 1938 he was sent to Czechoslovakia to cover the Munich crisis. This, you may recall, was the time when Neville Chamberlain famously waved his white paper and declared that he had achieved peace for our time. John would later accompany Chamberlain and Lord Halifax, the foreign minister, to Rome to meet with Mussolini in January 1939. From this we get the image of John as an academically gifted, intelligent and cultured young man. Whilst a journalist, he joined the Auxiliary Air Force, and when war broke out in September 1939, he joined the 609 Squadron. His brother Hugh, meanwhile, was quite different in personality. Like John, he had attended the Stowe School, but joined the Auxiliary Air Force straight after leaving in 1938. Just a day after his 19th birthday, he was commissioned as an acting pilot and assigned to the 616 Squadron. If John was an intelligent and capable journalist specialising in complex foreign affairs, then Hugh most typified the popular stereotype about fighter pilots. He would roar around the neighbourhood on an extremely noisy motorbike, and one anecdote goes that when he was stopped by a policeman on account of the noise, he said, "You'll have to speak up. I can't hear you for this thing." On another occasion, he was invited to a friendly tennis tournament, only to end up beating everyone there. Though this bravado and cavalier attitude is a stereotype about fighter pilots, it does make sense. If you're going to fly in a machine at hundreds of miles an hour, thousands of feet in the air, engaging in deadly combat, you have to be pretty confident. A letter Hugh sent home on the 23rd of August 1940, right in the middle of the Battle of Britain, details this. "Dearest Mummy," he writes, "I had to jump out yesterday evening when two explosive shells at 12,000 feet put my machine out of action and set fire to it. Please don't worry, as I really had quite an enjoyable parachute descent. Moreover, my injuries are very slight. The machine was blown about quite a bit and the jar dislocated my left shoulder, and a lot of little splinters got into my leg, but there is only one puncture worth speaking of, the rest being mere scratches. I can even walk about. The shoulder has been put back and is now quite comfortable in a sling. With a bit of luck I should be visiting Dale Cottage again before long. The doctor tells me that I can't possibly fly again for 6 weeks." He writes as though your plane catching fire 12,000 feet in the air and bailing out whilst injured is an everyday occurrence. John, meanwhile, was racking up kills. In the space of only 7 months, he had achieved 12 confirmed kills, 4 probables, 2 shared and 5 damaged. At a rate at some parts of almost a kill every single day, John was, like all pilots and crew taking part in the Battle of Britain, participating in an extraordinary number of actions. John's success was a source of obvious pride and perhaps a bit of good-natured sibling rivalry for Hugh, who wrote in that same letter, "My brother John had been involved in several fights. I heard that his personal score was mounting and I was desperately anxious to emulate his success." Success did eventually come to Hugh, but not to John's level. By the end of the war, he had racked up 4 confirmed kills, 6 shared, 2 shared probables, and 3 shared damaged. John's ability as a pilot was recognised in October 1940, when he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. We must pause here now to examine an unusual event which is a bit of a local mystery. What it does is illustrate the difficulties in local history, especially for a relatively minor event for which there is limited information available. At some point, one of the brothers, we don't know which one, landed his plane on the A635 bypass in Cawthorne and visited his parents in Dale House. Now, this raises a number of questions. Which brother landed the plane? What type of plane was it? Did it even happen? We'll tackle this one bit by bit. Some sources say that it was a Spitfire, others a Hurricane. This is an easy mistake to make, and it might seem like an inconsequential detail, but it does illustrate how easily information can become distorted. The squadrons of both Hugh and John were equipped with Spitfires, and both are recorded as flying Spitfires. Hence, it's likely that it was a Spitfire. A letter in the Barnsley Chronicle, however, claimed that it was a Hurricane, and that John was ordered to collect one from a nearby airfield and decided to drop in and visit his parents en route. However, having examined a fairly exhaustive list of planes used in both squadrons, neither of them at any time flew Hurricanes. Hence, it doesn't make sense as to why John would have to go and collect one. As such, it's likely that this is a mistake, although what the real situation was is now obscured. Anyway, it goes on to say that there was a battalion of infantry and vehicles camped on the bypass, and so he phoned up his parents to tell the commanding officer to move them, which he did, as he managed to land safely the next morning. He had coffee with his parents and then returned to find that the plane had been turned round by the villagers, ready for takeoff. There are those who believe that it didn't happen as recorded, that it was actually a completely different person under a completely different pretext flying a completely different plane, and even those who believe that it didn't happen at all. Well, in situations like this, I'm inclined to take the simple option. When you have multiple people attesting to the fact that either they themselves or their parents saw it or were involved in it, well, I'm inclined to believe them. As for the final question as to who actually flew the plane, well, it's impossible to say. My money's on Hugh, as it's the type of thing a cocky young man would do, but John also had a daredevil streak about him. His squadron leader described him as an excellent pilot, if a little overconfident, and had to be watched. And in an action report for the 27th of November 1940, we get a glimpse of this. A report came through to squadron operations that a Junkers 88 was returning to France, crossing the coast not far from Middle Wallop, where the squadron was based. John immediately asked permission to chase it, but was refused. He then asked if he could lead a training flight, and permission was granted. As soon as he was airborne, he peeled off the formation and headed straight for the coast at full throttle. He managed to catch up with the Junkers over the Cherbourg Peninsula and opened fire. With smoke streaming out of the stricken aircraft, Dundas broke off the attack. So we can see that John also had a cavalier streak about him, which doesn't make the mystery any easier to solve. Ultimately, we'll never know, and though it is a rather inconsequential thing which isn't that important, it does illustrate the myriad problems which local historians face. On the 28th of November, however, tragedy struck. At 15:50 hours, the squadron scrambled to intercept unidentified aircraft over the Isle of Wight. Squadron leader Robinson described seeing a large circus of ME-109s, and when the two forces engaged, he heard John saying over the radio, "I've finished an ME-109, whoopee," to which Robinson replied, "Good show, John." Nothing more was ever heard or seen of John again, despite numerous attempts by Robinson to make contact. Though there was much wishful thinking by the squadron that John may have gone further than they realised and landed on the water, this hope soon faded. That same day, one of the Luftwaffe's top fight commanders, Major Helmut Wick, went missing in action over the Isle of Wight. It soon became clear that he had been shot down by John, who had in turn been shot down by Wick's wingman, Rudolf Flans. John's body was never found, and a memorial lies on the Isle of Wight where the action took place. There is something incredible about this story. Helmut Wick was a German ace, credited with 56 kills, and was born in the same year as John. Awarded the Knight's Cross, he was only the fourth member of the armed forces to receive oak leaves to his, directly from Hitler himself. He was the youngest major in the Luftwaffe when he was shot down. Rudolph Flantz, who shot down John, would later also be awarded the Knight's Cross and credited with 52 kills by the time of his death in 1942. 3 highly decorated aces, with a combined kill count of 120, all engaging with and killing each other at the same time. The combat report wrote of John that his courageous example and breezy personality are sorely missed. A bar was awarded onto his Distinguished Flying Cross in January, with a citation reading that Flight Lieutenant Dundas has continued to engage the enemy with outstanding success and has now destroyed at least 12 of their aircraft and damaged many more. On one occasion he pursued an enemy aircraft from Winchester to Cherbourg and finally destroyed it. He has shown a magnificent fighting spirit which has inspired the other members of his flight. He is listed on panel 4 of the Runnymede Memorial and on Cawthorne's War Memorial. One of the Spitfires he flew is on display at the Imperial War Museum. Hugh, on the 1st of December 1940, wrote a letter to his parents which paints a sombre picture. When I arrived at tea time, I had the biggest shock of the war. Of my life, I suppose. Daddy had just received a telegram that John was missing after operations on the 28th. I went to Wortley in a daze. The truth hadn't really seeped through. So it has happened at last. I suppose that it had to happen. I suppose that we were inordinately lucky to have survived intact as long as we did. Of course, there is still hope. I tried all yesterday to phone Middle Wallop. Poor Mummy. If John is killed, and I did my best to persuade her otherwise, I believe that even her brave heart will be broken. Now I realise what these last months have meant to her, and that realisation is almost more bitter than the thought that John may be dead. Since my last entry, I have been down to Warmwell. All his squadron were very kind and their sympathy was very obvious and very sincere, but they held out little hope. On Tuesday I collected the Lagonda from Wallop, packed all John's personal belongings into the back and drove up as far as Stowe. The next day I came on up to Cawthorne. Mummy and Daddy have both stood up the shock remarkably well, though Mummy looks anything but well. Her bravery and balance are beyond all praise or expression. After 17 days I am back again at Cawthorne for Christmas. I don't remember much about those 17 days, except that they have been a queer blur, a mixture of sharp and happiness and restlessness. Unhappiness about John is gradually growing on me. For the first time I have felt a sickening desire to be away from aeroplanes and pilots. I suppose it will wear off. It's got to if I'm going to be any good again. Hugh continued to fly for the remainder of the war, serving in the Mediterranean and North Africa. Afterwards, he had a successful career in newspapers and television, eventually being awarded an MBE and a knighthood. He also served for a time as chairman of the cancer charity Macmillan, and each year his legacy is remembered through the Sir Hugh Dundas Award, given to volunteers who have made an exceptional effort and contribution to Macmillan's work. 2 brothers, 2 lives, similar and intertwined, who each made their own impact on the world in their own unique ways. They are just 2 of the estimated 3,000 pilots who served during the Battle of Britain, and their stories give us a fascinating glimpse into the vast array of personal memories from the Battle of Britain. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, I hope you've learnt something new, and hope to see you again soon.